hang on. If you're not subscribed and you like this content, subscribe. You'll get to see the videos sooner and support the channel. Only a handful of our viewers are actually subbed, so please give it a try. Being a fan of both Star Wars and Avatar: The Last Airbender, I've watched both multiple times, as I hope many of you have. I have been a long-time Star Wars fan, but have only recently become an Avatar fan. And it struck me one night at 3 AM that Avatar: The Last Airbender and Star Wars are basically the same thing, not in a bad way. Today we're going to explore the weird similarities between the two, just to see how close they really are, and see why it makes both of them so good or so bad. To start, there isn't really a comparison for the prequels. Obviously there's the stories like Kyoshi books and such, but I haven't read them, and therefore I cannot state whether they are similar to the prequels in any way. But if they are, why not tell me below in the comments. Now, the characters in the originals. We should start with some of the obvious ones. Vader and Zuko are very similar. Although it isn't a blood connection between Zuko and Aang, both of the pairs share a desire. Zuko's desire to regain his honor is that connection, while Vader's is to turn Luke to the dark side. That's the villain's connection that drives them to do most of what they do. This connection is also practically forced upon them by their higher-ups, and finally in their last moments they actually end up being good guys and betray the higher-up, which leads into the next characters, the Emperor and Firelord Ozai. Another obvious one. A leader of a government entity who's basically a teacher to the main villain. Their plans include being evil and scary just to be evil and scary. That's basically as far as their characters go, although both have some more in-depth moments about their past that gets revealed at one point to the main villain. The hero side is also pretty simple. Luke and Aang are obvious counterparts. They both hold an extreme power, especially compared to the rest of the main gang. They have an innocence to them at the beginning of their journeys, but as they go on, they grow up and learn the realizations of the world and the horrors they can only fix. They also receive teachings from many people who share their powers. They even both at one point disregard a teacher for selfish reasons, which actually ends up impeding their future and causes them to be at their lowest because of disregarding their teacher. Oddly specific, but it's cool that they share such a small detail, and that is so important to both of their stories. Also, their final arc is overcoming challenges, meeting with old teachers, and beating the big bad guy. Obviously slightly different details with how they are defeated, but both actually keep the moral of not wanting to kill the really big bad guy. Leia and Katara next, and they aren't just similar because they're females. They actually both share a similar power as the hero, but it's not really explored as much. They also appear in the sequels as a teacher role to the new hero. Both also happen to fall in love with one of the heroes, making it a defining part of their character and that other heroes as well. They are also both shown before the main hero, are the reason the main hero is even part of the story at all, and are a big reason why the hero does anything they do. The next one is a little bit of a stretch, but Sokka and Han are the same character. They both share small characteristics like not believing in the power that the main characters hold at first, then eventually has a change of heart. Sokka and Han also don't have this power, which lends them to be skilled in other areas that are helpful, like Han's piloting and Sokka's swordsmanship. They also end up being very important for the final fight and taking down the military side while the main hero and villain fight one-on-one. Other than that, there aren't a whole lot of other similarities, although they play similar roles, like sarcastic comedic relief. Toff and Lando are the next characters that are similar. They both appear in the second act, are heavy on the comedic relief, and bouncing off the others well. Their stories are really what's similar. At first, they aren't really well intertwined with the main group. They have issues getting along with the main three from the first act. They also hold personal goals that can only be achieved by helping the main characters. Now, Lando and Han go way back where Toff and Sokka don't, but that's also because Toff and Sokka are kids. There are probably a lot more and a lot more details you can go into, especially for some side characters. But it's not really much to go into because of how little their characters are. Like, technically Boba Fett and the lizard bounty hunter girl are the same because they are hired by the Empires in order to hunt the main characters, and they succeed, but it wouldn't be worth to go into detail for every single side character. So, how are the stories similar? Obviously the characters within them have similar personalities and therefore make the plot somewhat similar, but it's cool how close they actually are. So in both, the main characters are innocent young guys outside of a war that spans across their entire world. They are almost involuntarily thrown into the war because of their special powers, and how they can change the tide of the war. The first act, Book 1 or A New Hope, both follow the journey of this hero through a bizarre world that they plan to help by defeating the Imperial power. While on this journey, they also learn to control their special powers from an older teacher, and although Atlas happens primarily at the end, it does at least happen before the final battle. The final battle is when the Empire decides to finally attack a base that the rebels are hiding at in order to change the tide of the war into their favor. The winner of this fight will be an advantage in the war, and therefore it's one of the defining battles. During this final battle, the main evil guy doesn't stay with the fleet and tries to fight the main hero one-on-one, where they are eventually taken out by the rest of the hero's gang. The special powers that the main characters hold also end up being the thing that wins the battle and puts a cheery end to the first season or movie. The second act starts with almost a side adventure before getting into the real plot. The first few episodes of Avatar Season 2 are equivalent to the Battle of Hoth, setting up for the eventual meeting with Toff or Lando. During this act, the main character spends most of the season trying to learn to control their abilities better, and ultimately failing for the majority of it. The teachers, although seem like they wouldn't be powerful, are the most powerful ones with this special power, and when their student can't learn, it also disappoints them. Vader and Zuko take similar roles, even though at first, it doesn't seem like it. They are more rogue compared to the first act, and will stop at nothing to catch the main hero, even leading to some poor choices. There's also a slight plot point where the main transportation is taken out of the story, making it harder to run away from the Empire. At the end of the season, both the main heroes are forced to choose between their powers and training or their friends, and both choose their friends, which leads to them being at a disadvantage when they are fighting the big final boss of the season. And while at their weakest, they are both struck down and left to die basically, if not for their friends saving them. The third one starts with a little side adventure, hiding out in the Fire Nation or saving Han from Jabba, that then leads to planning and eventually fighting on the final acts. These big fights are split into two sections, armies against armies and very powerful 1v1s with special powers. And even some of the interactions with these are similar, such as Sokka and Han being the leaders of the rebellion against the militaries. There's probably a lot more, but to look at just these few examples and see that these plot structures are extremely similar in a lot of ways. It's fascinating. Now it's the sequels. Although they don't follow a similar plot structure, they do have something similar in common. They're both sequels to very successful originals that tried living up to them by doing similar, if not the same stuff, while hiding under the disguise of stop comparing it to the original, which is the worst possible defense for these because it allows them to be bad. See, the problem with both of the sequels is that they copy things from the original, but without the same emotion that the original gains. Remember when Yoda picked up Luke's X-Wing? Well, the same thing happens in episode 9, but it's Luke doing it for Rey. Except this time there's nothing to it. Just trying to get the reaction because I get the reference. The same exact thing happens in The Legend of Korra. Remember the air scooters that Aang makes, which grants him the rank of an airbending master, but actually hurts hard when it turns out it's the same reason why he can't play with the other kids? Because it wouldn't be fair? Yeah, well, Korra and the rest of the airbenders use it for a race. And she turns into the Avatar state, which is another example, but it's not the one I'm focusing on. All this is a reference to the original to make fans say, hey, I remember that. The main character is also similar. It's a female-led season, which doesn't inherently make it bad, but the writers fail to make this lead character struggle. Korra does have some struggles into season 4, which is much needed, but it seems to have little to no effect on her, and in the long run, it's not brought up after the first few episodes, so it basically doesn't exist. Anyways, the lead females almost never struggle, and when they do, it's resolved almost immediately by some form of random luck or skill that they shouldn't possess, but do. These females are Mary Sue's in the strongest of ways, because they are so unrelatable and boring to watch that for both of them, they're probably the worst character in their respective series. Even worse, they gain more powers that seemed impossible before, but they somehow achieve it with little to no struggle. It's hilarious how both have made great characters before, but fail when trying to get it to be a strong female lead. So, why? Why am I bringing this up? Being a fan of these franchises, it's definitely not to tear them down in any way, even the rant about the sequels. No, it's to point out how it defends either their strengths or their weaknesses. We can see where Star Wars fails in the sequels, because The Legend of Korra failed in similar ways. We can see where Atlas succeeds in its storytelling because Star Wars succeeded in similar ways. Similar, not a copy. The two franchises manage a similar story structure within completely different worlds, similar characters that manage to be unique within their own story, and because of that we can study more like it. What other stories are similar? What other stories make a similar plot but within its own unique world and even on a smaller level? Well, that's it. I'll be honest, I don't know how to end it other than, this is a thought that I had at 3 AM. That thought was, isn't it weird how the final battle in Season 3 of Avatar is the same as the final battle in Return of the Jedi? And after that, I got literally everything else from things I just thought were similar. It's just a cool little fun fact I thought was worth sharing. Other than that, please comment if you agree, or if I missed any other important parts, and I'll see you in the next one.